What would you do if the woman you sent for, the quiet, obedient wife you ordered through a newspaper ad out in the middle of nowhere, stepped off that stagecoach with a rifle slung over one shoulder, a look in her eyes that could stop a rattlesnake cold, and absolutely zero interest in your expectations? What would you do if she wasn't just unafraid of you, but was better at everything you thought made you the man of this land? Stay right here, because by the time this story is done, you're going to understand why the toughest man in Redrock County met his match on a Tuesday afternoon, and why his name got forgotten while hers got carved into legend. This is the American West, 1873. And nothing, not the dust, not the drought, not the men with guns, is what it seems. The town of Redrock sat in the throat of a canyon like something the land had swallowed and couldn't spit back out. 47 buildings, one church with a cracked bell, a general store that doubled as the post office, the barber shop, and, on Friday evenings, the courthouse. The saloon never closed, and every single soul in that town, from the preacher down to the stable boy, moved according to one man's rhythm. His name was Callum Holt. 42 years old, built like a barn door, with hands that had broken more things than they'd ever fixed. He owned the biggest cattle operation in 4 counties, a stretch of land so vast you couldn't ride across it in a single day. He had money. He had power. He had 43 men who answered to him. What Callum Holt did not have was a wife. And that, according to Callum, was a problem that needed solving the same way every other problem got solved out here, efficiently, with as little fuss as possible. So he placed an ad. He didn't put it in the fancy Eastern papers. He put it in the Territorial Gazette, a publication that reached towns from Santa Fe to the Nevada line, read mostly by men who worked with their hands and women who knew what hard living looked like. The ad was exactly 24 words long. He'd counted them twice. Rancher, 42, seeks practical wife, must cook, clean, follow direction without complaint, good health required, respond to C. Holt, Red Rock, New Mexico territory. 42 words. He got 11 responses. 10 of them were what he expected. Women in their 20s and 30s. Cautious letters written in careful handwriting, asking polite questions about the house and the land, and whether there were other women nearby. The 11th letter was different. It was short. It was written in a hand that pressed so hard into the paper, it left ridges on the back. And it said, and this is important, almost nothing about what he'd asked for. Mr. Holt, I am 38 years old. I have worked cattle. I have filed a land claim. I have set a broken leg in the field and kept riding. I do not cook particularly well. I follow direction when the direction makes sense. I am coming regardless. Eleanor Marsh. Now here's where most men would have written back. Said no, explained that Eleanor Marsh had apparently not understood the assignment. Callum Holt was not most men. He was stubborn, arrogant, and incapable of backing down from anything, which meant that when someone essentially dared him, his instinct wasn't to retreat. It was to double down. He told himself he'd meet this woman, straighten her out on the terms, and if she didn't agree, he'd put her back on the next stage. He never once considered that she might not be the one who needed straightening. Drop a comment below. Have you ever underestimated someone and paid the price for it? Because Callum Holt is about to find out what that feels like at full volume. Eleanor Marsh grew up in Kansas, not the pretty part of Kansas, the brutal part, where the wind doesn't stop and the sky is so wide it makes you feel small in a way that either breaks you or builds you into something iron hard. Her father had been a surveyor. Her mother had died when Eleanor was 9, and there was no one to take over the household except Eleanor herself. By the time she was 14, she could outride most of the men in the county. By 18, she had her own rifle, a Winchester that her father had traded 2 months' wages to get, and she could hit a fence post at 150 yards. Not because she was showing off, because out there, being able to hit what you aimed at was the difference between eating and not eating, between safe and not safe. She'd been engaged once, a man named Robert Pryor, who was handsome in a way that didn't last and confident in a way that wasn't earned. He'd left when the homestead got hard, just rode off one morning like the difficulty was something he could put in his rear view if he moved fast enough. Eleanor had watched him go from the porch, arms crossed, and decided something important that morning. She would never again organize her life around what a man needed from her. She would be her own terms, full stop. The years that followed were not easy. She filed a claim in the Colorado Territory and worked it until the water dried up. She drove cattle on a trail run when the regular hands came down with fever, and the trail boss was desperate enough not to care that she was a woman. She nursed a wound from a wire fence that would have killed someone without her particular stubbornness about dying. And then, at 38 years old, after a series of events that left her land gone, her savings thin, and her options narrowed, she saw the ad. She didn't respond because she was desperate. She responded because something in the blunt arrogance of those 24 words struck her as a challenge. And Eleanor Marsh had never once in her life walked away from a challenge. The stage from Albuquerque to Redrock took 2 days. She rode it with a carpet bag, a bedroll, and the Winchester wrapped in canvas because she'd learned long ago that showing a gun before you needed it was poor strategy. She sat by the window and watched the land flatten and redden and crumble into canyon country. And she felt, for the first time in a long time, curious about what came next. And now, if you've been nodding along, if you've ever rooted for the person walking into a situation that everyone else assumed they couldn't handle, this is where you subscribe. Hit that button and stick around, because the moment Eleanor Marsh steps off that stagecoach is the moment everything in Redrock County changes. And I promise you, the rest of this story has things in it that you will not see coming. The stagecoach pulled into Redrock on a Tuesday at 2:30 in the afternoon, the kind of afternoon where the sun was mean and the dust didn't settle. Callum Holt was waiting at the stop. He had his foreman, a quiet man named Beau, standing a few feet back like a second opinion. Callum had his arms crossed, his hat pushed down, and an expression that people in Redrock had learned not to argue with. 3 passengers got off before Eleanor. Then she stepped down. She was tall, taller than he'd expected, and her frame carried the kind of lean, functional strength that comes from years of actual work rather than the kind of posture that's performed for an audience. The rifle was visible now, slung across her back with the ease of something she'd carried so long it had become part of her silhouette. Her coat was trail-worn, her boots were broken in, her eyes brown, sharp, and absolutely not impressed by what she was looking at, swept the town in exactly the way someone surveys new terrain before deciding whether it's worth the trouble. She looked at Callum for about 3 seconds. Then she looked past him at the canyon walls. "Good bones," she said. About the canyon, not about him. Callum Holt had never, not once in his 42 years, been assessed and found less interesting than a geological feature. He stood there for a moment with the expression of a man who has just discovered the rules of a game he thought he already knew. "Miss Marsh," he said. "Mrs." She corrected him and then clarified before he got the wrong idea. "Widow. 3 years. Move on." She picked up her carpet bag. She looked at Beau, correctly identified him as the more competent person in the immediate vicinity, and said, "I assume there's a house. Who shows me where it is?" The next 10 days in Redrock were, by the account of every man and woman who witnessed them, the most educational 10 days the town had seen since the railroad survey crew had come through and turned out to be completely incompetent. Eleanor did not cook particularly well. This was not a false statement she'd put in her letter as false modesty. It was a genuine, documented fact that revealed itself on the first evening when she produced a meal that was technically edible in the same way that a boot is technically edible. Callum ate it without comment, which was itself a form of communication. What Eleanor could do, what became apparent with a speed that left Callum and his 43 men slightly off balance, was everything else. On the third day, there was a problem with the north fence line. One of the hands had reported a section down and estimated it would take a full day to repair with 2 men on it. Eleanor, who had ridden out to see the land on her own terms that morning, had already looked at the break and told the foreman exactly which posts were the structural problem and which ones were cosmetic. The repair took 4 hours with 2 men because she was right about which ones actually mattered. On the 5th day, one of the horses developed a problem with its foreleg. The veterinarian, a man who charged by the mile to come out, had been sent for. Eleanor, who had passed the horse on her way to look at the water situation, diagnosed the issue herself, applied a poultice that she mixed from things she found in the cook's larder, and by the time the veterinarian arrived the following afternoon, the problem was already improving. He charged the visit fee anyway. She looked at him with an expression that suggested she found this philosophically interesting. On the 7th day, 2 men from the Garver outfit, a competing ranch that had been gradually testing Callum's boundaries for 2 years, rode onto the property and made it about a half-mile past the gate before Eleanor, who was checking the fence line alone, told them to stop. They laughed. This was, in retrospect, the wrong response. She didn't shoot them. She didn't threaten them. She told them, in a conversational tone that was somehow more intimidating than any raised voice, exactly how many legal problems they were currently creating for their employer by trespassing on posted land, named the territorial statute by number, and explained that she had a very good memory and fully intended to testify to the exact time and position of their entry if it came to that. They left. One of them looked back once. She was already back at the fence, not watching them go, because she didn't need to. Here's what Callum Holt wasn't: stupid. He was wrong about a lot of things. He was arrogant. He had the particular blindness of a powerful man who has spent so long being agreed with that he's forgotten what it feels like to be wrong about something significant. But he was not stupid. He watched what was happening, really watched it. And he began to understand, slowly, and with the unpleasant sensation of a man swallowing something he'd rather spit out, that the arrangement he had constructed in his head was not the arrangement that had materialized in front of him. He had wanted a helper, something quiet and useful that reduced the domestic friction of his life. What he had was a partner, and a partner, as any honest rancher will tell you, changes the whole equation. The problem, and there was a problem because there's always a problem, was that the formal terms of their arrangement were still unsettled. Eleanor was living in the house. She was functioning, essentially, as a fully operational human being with her own agenda and an alarming capacity for competence. But nothing had actually been formalized, and Callum, for the first time in 2 decades, didn't know how to open a negotiation that he wasn't certain he was going to win. He did what powerful people often do when they don't know what to do. He called a meeting of just the 2 of them in the kitchen on the evening of the 10th day. He sat across from her and put his hands flat on the table and started talking about expectations, about the arrangement, about what he needed from the situation. Eleanor let him finish. She poured herself coffee. She set the pot down, and she looked at him with the expression of someone who has been in enough negotiations to recognize when the other person's opening position is built on incorrect information. "You wrote 24 words in that ad," she said. "I wrote back with 42. Did you read them?" He had. He remembered everyone. Then you already knew who was getting off that stage, she said. The question you're actually asking isn't about terms. It's whether you can do business with someone who isn't going to pretend to be smaller than they are, so you feel like the biggest thing in the room. The silence that followed that sentence was the kind of silence that changes things. What are you thinking right now? Drop it in the comments. I want to know whether you think Callum says yes or no, because the answer might surprise you. Callum Holt sat with that silence for a long time, long enough that the lamp started to flicker in the draft from the window. Long enough that Eleanor, who had plenty of patience when patience was the right tool, just waited. And then he did something that no one in Redrock County, not his foreman Bo, not his banker, not the 43 men on his payroll, had ever seen Callum Holt do. He laughed, not the dismissive kind, not the kind that's a cousin to contempt, the genuine kind, the kind that comes up from somewhere real, that a man makes when he finally sees something clearly and discovers it's actually better than what he thought he'd find. All right, he said. Say what the terms are. Eleanor set her coffee cup down. I work this ranch as a full partner, not staff, she said. That means decisions about the land, the herd, the water rights. I'm at that table, not beside it. Go on. I keep my name, I keep my rifle. And if you disagree with my judgment on something, you say so out loud like a person, not by going around me to the men. He was quiet again. She continued. In exchange, I will commit to this operation with everything I have, and I have more to give than you know yet. But it doesn't work if we're pretending I'm something. I'm not just because it's tidier for your reputation. Callum looked at her for a long time. The cooking, he said, that stays bad? Almost certainly, she said. Then Bo's wife keeps doing Sundays. That seems fair. He put his hand out across the table. She looked at it, and him, and shook it once, firm, the way people shake on things they mean. What followed over the next 2 years is the part of the story that people in Redrock County still talk about. The Holt operation, which had been big but vulnerable, the way things that look strong from outside sometimes are, became something different. Eleanor's eye for land and water changed how they managed the drought seasons. She pushed Callum to file proper water rights claims on 2 streams before the Garver outfit could get to them, and the legal battle that followed, which she researched herself, writing letters to lawyers in Santa Fe and eventually getting the right one, settled permanently in Holt's favor. The North Range, which had been losing cattle to breaks and strays for years, got re-fenced according to Eleanor's specifications. She trained 2 of the hands herself on the technique because she understood that a fence built right is worth 3 times a fence built fast. She formed a formal arrangement with the widow who ran the Redrock General Store, a woman named Clara Voss, who had been quietly managing more of the town's commerce than anyone gave her credit for. That gave both operations better terms on goods and created a credit relationship that helped both survive a particularly savage winter in 1875. And she kept the rifle. She never had to use it on a person. She did use it once on a mountain lion that had been taking calves from the eastern pasture. One shot at a distance that Bo paced out afterward at just under 200 yards, and then said nothing about because he respected facts when he saw them. Callum, to his credit, learned. He learned to say, "Let me ask Eleanor," before making the kind of decision he used to make alone. He learned that the reputation he'd spent 2 decades building didn't shrink when he shared authority. It grew because the operation grew, and because the people who worked for them saw that decisions were getting made by people who actually thought them through. He was still stubborn, still had the voice that could carry across a canyon, still had the hands that had broken more things than they'd fixed. But he also had, for the first time in his life, someone in the room who would look at him straight and say when something wasn't right. And he discovered slowly, the way men like him discover most things, that this was more valuable than he'd ever imagined. What does this story mean? It's easy to read it as just an adventure. A woman who showed up and proved everyone wrong. The end. But there's something more specific here. Something the history of the American West keeps showing us if we look at it honestly. The frontier myth sold one version of strength. Solitary, loud, settled by force. The man who didn't need anyone. The man whose word was law. But the ranches and towns that survived the West, that made it through drought and winter and legal fights and the slow grind of economics, almost never did it alone. They did it through partnership, through recognizing competence when they saw it, through making agreements that reflected reality instead of pride. Eleanor Marsh and Callum Holt built something that lasted, not because she softened him and not because he tolerated her, because they actually looked at each other and made a deal based on what was true. That's rarer than a rifle shot at 200 yards, and it's worth more. This video is a work of creative fiction, reconstructed by artificial intelligence as an independent artistic production designed to entertain and offer something worth thinking about. The figures, ranches, names, events, and places depicted here are products of storytelling and imagination. For historical records of life in the American West, we encourage you to explore the wonderful archives and academic sources dedicated to that era. They are full of real stories that are just as remarkable as this one.